Welcome to another episode of Fantasy Reality. And try to ignore the buzzing in the background. There's a couple of bumblebees behind the camera. Today's episode, let's talk a little bit about the let's talk about why there's such a diversity of species in a fantasy series. If we're going with, a lot of common species you're going to find in a fantasy series. Well, first up, you're going to have humans, or at least human analogs. Because, let's face it, most of us relate to humans because we are humans. So, they gotta be included. Another race that tends to be involved are dwarves. Usually they're gonna be around 5 feet or thereabouts. Sometimes a little bit shorter. They tend to be a bit stocky. They apparently love being underground, or at least that's where they're usually found, putting up mines and the like, working in mines, building them. Then we have elves. Depending on the depiction, you might have them residing in a forest of some sort, apparently living in relative harmony with nature. Then there's orcs, who, for the most part, are depicted as being green in some cases. They might have big teeth. Tend to be fairly strong, especially compared to the average human. Elves, their kind of strength kind of all depends. Sometimes they're stronger, sometimes they're at least quicker. Kind of all depends, though. Dwarves, they're usually stronger than humans, comparatively. Let's see here. Might also have halflings who are about 3 feet tall, give or take. As previously mentioned, try to ignore the buzzing. And sometimes you might have cat folk, you might have lizard people, you might have dragons, which are just plain cool, but one can argue how cool they really are. They're coming after you. You might have other beast people, depending on the setting. I say nothing about various others who they might look a bit human, but they might have different features. Like maybe they have horns, maybe they have claws. Werewolves are a popular one. Vampires, again, another popular one. And of course you got various werebeasts. But why so many? Why these? You're going to have at least half a dozen different species, sometimes more. So, why do we put them in these stories? Well, in many cases, we use them as analogies for different races, different ethnicities, different religions, politics, and all that sort of stuff. Reason is, let's face it, these days it's not a good idea to have, say, a quote human army that's going to be comprised of only one race, religion, facial, skin color, and that sort of stuff. I mean, because for the most part, that's considered racist. It's like, oh, you mean the heroes are all white? And the bad guys are all other colorations? Obviously, racist film. But, so basically, if you're having a human army, it's got to have people of the different skin colorations that can be applied on a human level. Unless you're talking about, like, say, a really small group. Then you might have one or two guys that look different. But that sort of thing does, although sometimes that sort of thing does happen, where you have a group that's more or less comprised of what looks to be the same race, or alternatively, maybe one or two people who do have a different skin coloration compared to the rest. Because, let's face it, that does happen. To be honest, where I live, a lot of people are, well, let's be honest, they're white, a lot of them. And as for those who are tan or darker in coloration, at least where I live, not a whole lot. Of course, if you move around, go to some other areas, you're probably going to find people who have different skin tones. Sometimes they're more of one tone, and then sometimes you have a lot of different tones. And of course, you got this bumblebee buzzing around. But again, let's take a look at the movie Bright, starring Will Smith and Joel Edgerton. Which, in my opinion, I think is kind of ironic for their choice of casting. You have Will Smith. He's an African American. He's playing a human cop. And you have Joel Edgerton. I'm not quite sure what he is, but I think he's Caucasian, white. And he's playing an orc. Now, I'm not saying that African Americans can't be racist towards other people, because, let's face it, everyone has a bit of racism somewhere. I myself, well, as my mother says, there are times where she has to rein in on her Archie Bunker. I wouldn't know too much about that because I never watched that show. But every now and then, well, who knows? You run into someone who's like, yep, you seem to fit the usual, quote, stereotype. And then you got others who don't seem to be part of that, quote, stereotype. But, like I said, Bright, you have, well, you have the orcs. They tend to represent a number of different minorities. Because, one, they like to use their orcish language as a means of saying, let's mess around with these guys, make them think that we don't understand a word they just said, and they can't understand a word we say. There's some groups who will take advantage of the fact that the cops don't. That, other groups of people do not understand the language that you are using. And sometimes these people will indeed hide the fact that, oh, we understand every word you just said. Now let us insult you in our language. And odds are you won't understand that we just insulted you. Because this sort of thing does happen. Well, the orcs, they do a number of this, and it kind of gets a little bit funny, where Will Smith's character, he, as well as Joe Edgerton's character, they're trying to escape from this one group, and they find themselves surrounded by the members of this orc gang, and Will Smith, he tells Joel's character, like, well, basically, he yells at all these orcs, saying a bunch of things, basically telling them to go home, don't bother us. And then turns to Joel Edgerton's character, says, now you trace all of that into Orcish and make sure that they understand it. And Joel Edgerton's character looks at Will Smith's like, they understand English. And the look on Will Smith's character's like, oh boy. And he's looking at the orcs, he's like, you understand English? The funny part is, the orcs, they look at each other and go, yeah, we understand English. And what happens afterwards, like, oh dear. You just have to put your hand over your face, like, you walked right into that one. But, like, and this sort of thing, well, the whole hiding behind the language does occur. And it's like, and just because, for instance, English is the main language in the film, but on a plus side, that wasn't a bee. But, like I said, you have the elves, they have their own language, and the orcs, they have their own language. And of course, you got Will Smith, who apparently doesn't understand either Elvish or Orcish. And, okay, maybe that's a bit justified if he grew up in it, but I can understand maybe that he can't speak it, but it's like, you mean you don't even understand what these guys are saying? I'll be honest, I took Spanish for a number of years. I never got the hang of it. And I'll be honest, I barely remember any of it. On the other hand, if say I lived next to a community of people who primarily spoke Spanish, you can bet dollars to cents that, at the very least, I would understand it. Or at least well enough to understand, okay, this guy just insulted my mother. Or, oh, this guy wants me to ask my mother if she'd like to come over, if we'd like to come over for Sunday's dinner. At least understand that. Is he threatening to insult me, or is he trying to be polite to me? That sort of thing, kind of useful if you're dealing with other languages. And not speaking it, again, well, that's justifiable. If you don't speak the language too well, you're probably not going to speak it. On the other hand, you could at least, if you live next to a group of people who speak it all the time, you might pay attention. And you might at least understand the language, even if you cannot speak it. And, in a sense, this also applies to the different races in a fantasy world. The different races tend to use their own languages. So it's like, how do you communicate with one another? Well, that's where you have people who learn the other languages. You have people who have either resided with these other groups or have lived alongside of them and have learned their language, that you can understand one another. You understand if this group is coming by and would like to do some trading with you, or if they're coming to destroy your home. It's kind of useful to know. And okay, let's say you see a bunch of orcs. They show up. They're all armed to the teeth, including the teeth, and they're saying something to you. It might be a good idea to know if they're saying, "Hi, have you seen this particular guy? He just killed a bunch of our people." Or, "Hi, we've been traveling a long way. Maybe spend the night in your barn." Be a good idea to know that. Or alternatively, if they're just planning, "We're going to destroy your place," be a good idea to know they're planning on that, as opposed to just assuming that they're here to try to destroy the place. When they're just, like I said, when they're just asking, "Hey, got a place where we can stay for the night?" Kind of useful. And, but like I said, these different species, elves, dwarves, trolls, orcs, like I said, they all represent different races, the different national origins, different religions, different whatever it is that humans like to use to divide ourselves. That's what these different races tend to represent, the different divisions. So, that's something to think about the next time you're writing, that you're creating a story. Just what do these different groups really represent? I guess it might also explain why there's also in a number of fantasy series why you have half humans and half elves, or half humans and half orcs. Something worth thinking of. Well, that's it for this episode of Fantasy Reality. See you later.